what do you feel like the best strategy is if you have a bunch of debt piling up and you need to deal with it?
It can get a little bit complicated. And the reason why is because there are mortgages in first position and mortgages in second position. There are what you're used to as a plain mortgage that's amortized over a number of years, and there are home equity lines of credit. There is prime lending, A lending, what most of us are used to, and there is alternative lending. And then in alternative lending, there's alternative lending that's very much like A lending that you're used to. And then there's alternative lending that is, as you mentioned, can be even predatory or just something you want to avoid. You definitely have to have a solid exit strategy for it.
Amazing. So maybe it would be helpful if we actually went through a few scenarios of types of files that you've looked at and how it's actually helped people, because I know that the need for this is vast, but how it's applied to different people based on their current situation is a little bit different.
Yes. So as you mentioned, there can be shame associated when you have a lot of debt to consolidate. And people start doing their research on the internet, which is usually very helpful. But in this case, it's really not, because you don't know how lenders are going to look at your file. I had a friend who had a lot of debt because she had gone back to school, and she felt really terrible about their situation. But when I actually was able to look at their credit and their file, they really weren't that bad. And she had been looking on the internet at terrible alternative lenders that she didn't need to consider. And we were able to refinance everything with a prime lender, one mortgage payment, and greatly increase their cash flow.
You know, as mentioned, all the situations are so different. And then, you know, like you can recover, right? People are like, oh, I don't want to take equity out of my house because that's my savings. And if it's a short-term thing, then they think, oh, I'm going to be able to catch up. But when something like we have going on right now, where you're really not in control of all the factors that have made the big change in your cash flow, then to think, you know, oh, you know, we're going to be able to catch up, it's a little more difficult. So sometimes if you make a better decision now, if your income does change for whatever reason, or you're able to address some of your expenses, which is also a journey people need to walk through sometimes when they're going through this process, then if you have done something like a refinance, then at least you can make additional payments on that mortgage and bring down the debt that way. And it's going to be at a much lower interest rate. So I think if people, like you said, get over the shame, then it's so much easier to deal with this.